我从中国坐飞机来到俄罗斯的。
I flew from China to Russia, then was transferred to a recruitment office in Ufa. After the physical exam, I waited for over a month, and during that time, I could only play on my phone. Our group trained for a week in both Russia's Rostov and in Ukraine. Then, without any warning, our phones, passports, and bank cards were taken, and we were sent straight to the front line. I originally just wanted to work in the logistics unit to earn commissions and support my parents. Instead, I was tricked into going to the front line, but I never fired a gun the whole time.
On June 28th, the Ukrainian military released a video showing Wang Meng, a Chinese soldier, captured during the conflict. In the video, Wang Meng mentioned that he was unaware of the situation on the battlefield, but his commanders had consistently pushed him to advance. After reaching the front line, they lost all support during a day and night without food or water. Despite this, their commanders continued to force them forward. After crawling through a wheat field and nearing Ukrainian positions, Wang Meng chose to surrender, stating that he felt the Russian military was leading him to his death. He also shared that two other Chinese soldiers serving with him had been severely injured, one by a mortar shell to the buttocks and the other by an explosion that severed both legs. Without any rescue, they were left lying there, likely to die from blood loss. He concluded that war was terrifying and that he was afraid. He just wanted to return home and reunite with his parents. In another video, believed to have been posted by Chinese soldiers, several members of the Russian 102nd Military Base introduced themselves. The video shows several soldiers identifying themselves with their Chinese names and ages. Wang Meng recognized the individuals in the video, stating, "I know them, I was there with them." Senior analysts have pointed out that the seizure of phones, passports, and bank cards from these Chinese mercenaries and sending logistics personnel directly to the front line to die could only have happened with the tacit approval of the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, it seems likely that the CCP even instructed Russia to take these actions. These Chinese mercenaries made their first appearance in a video on June 1st, and by June 28th, they were reported captured. They were likely deployed to the front line between June 25th and 27th. What transpired during this period? The 12-day war started on June 13th, when Israel's Air Force conducted 1,200 sorties without any losses, eliminating 30 senior Iranian officials and 11 nuclear scientists, before the U.S. military dropped a massive bunker buster bomb to completely destroy Iran's nuclear ambitions. During this time, Iran was largely powerless, only launching a few missiles with little impact. The timeline suggests that after President Trump declared the end of the 12-day war between Israel and Iran on June 25th, the Chinese mercenaries were stripped of their phones and bank cards and sent to the front. This cannot be dismissed as a coincidence. It is clear that these mercenaries were abandoned. The CCP's leadership is clearly shaken by Israel's decapitation capabilities and the U.S. military's bunker buster weapon. The powerful Israeli Air Force and the U.S. military's precise strikes have made them realize that the soldiers they sent to Russia for training no longer served any purpose. The CCP may have wanted to distance itself from the war to avoid suffering the same fate as the high-ranking Iranian officials. The 12-day war may also have altered Putin's perspective, as Russia might wish to quickly end the conflict with Ukraine. If so, the Chinese soldiers initially tasked with logistics would no longer be necessary in Russia. Bringing them back would become a burden for both Russia and the CCP. Russia would have to pay the mercenaries' wages, while the CCP would need to accommodate these unfinished military personnel and be concerned about them potentially leaking foreign information. Therefore, the simplest solution would be to dispose of these mercenaries on site. This is a traditional approach for communist regimes. Some may offer a different perspective, as recent reports from Ukraine suggest that China plans to send around 600 military personnel to Russia for specialized training, specifically aimed at countering Western weapon systems. Does this contradict previous statements? In fact, it does not. Let's take a closer look. A recent report from the Kiev Post, citing sources from Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Agency, revealed that the Kremlin has officially decided to host this batch of CCP military personnel at major Russian military bases and training centers. The report states that the Russian military training will cover core military areas such as tank operations, artillery tactics, military engineering, and air defense system use, aiming to impart valuable combat experience gained from Russia's conflict with Ukraine. The strategic background of this military cooperation is that, after more than 3 years of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the Russian military has accumulated extensive experience dealing with Western advanced weapons. Ukraine's intelligence agency believes this move clearly signals Russia's intent to form a closer military alliance with the CCP, engaging in a global strategic confrontation with the Western Bloc. Analysts suggest that the Chinese mercenaries appearing on the Russia-Ukraine battlefield are primarily dispatched by the CCP. The goal is to gain hands-on experience in combat, learn Western tactics, and understand weapon performance. This is part of the broader military cooperation between China and Russia. Sending military observers under the guise of mercenaries, with a few non-professional civilian soldiers mixed in to confuse the situation, was likely a request from the CCP. Russia initially refused to send Chinese personnel to the core combat units due to significant distrust and concerns about the potential leak of sensitive military technology. However, over the course of the 3-year war, Russia, claimed to be the second most powerful military in the world, has shown inefficiency in command, incompetence, and outdated weaponry when facing Ukraine's much smaller military force. Chinese military personnel have observed these weaknesses and learned what they needed. The tactics and weapons considered secrets by Russia have lost their value to China. Notably, Ukraine's air force is not strong, mainly operating old Soviet-era aircraft, with a few Western-made F-16A/B jets recently received. Compared to Taiwan's air force, equipped with advanced F-16Vs, Ukraine's air force offers little CCP to learn from. The decision to send 600 Chinese military personnel to Russia for official training is more a political signal from Russia to the outside world. On one hand, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea bloc. Following the severe weakening of Iran, China and Russia are strategically aligning. On the other hand, Russia, in hopes of ending the war with Ukraine quickly, needs negotiation leverage. By signaling a military alliance with China, Russia aims to create a special strategic relationship, ultimately seeking more advantage in negotiations. At the same time, Russia is working to strengthen its military ties with China, hoping to pull China deeper into the European conflict before a ceasefire is reached. This strategy seeks to expand China's role in European security, ultimately challenging the CCP's outward neutrality. The goal appears clear: to involve China fully in the conflict, ensuring both sides face the consequences together. This led to a surprising turn of events. While Russia announced plans to train 600 Chinese military personnel, dealt with the Chinese mercenaries who had previously supported Russian forces. Russia likely believes that since the CCP doesn't treat its own citizens with respect, there's no reason to hold back. Moreover, Russia has never truly considered forming a genuine alliance with China. The front lines could either be members of the Chinese military or civilians tacitly allowed by the CCP to go to Russia. Regardless, they only realized at the end that they had been deceived. Russia's actions mirrored past tactics, treating these individuals as cannon fodder. Ultimately, they were discarded by their own government and country. Could China and Russia become true allies for mutual benefit? On May 7th, CCP leader Xi Jinping traveled to Moscow to participate in the 80th anniversary of Victory Day in World War II. The primary goal during this trip was likely to align with Russia in opposition to the U.S. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin made it clear that the China-Russia relationship is not directed against any third party. The CCP's propaganda tried to cover up the stance of Moscow. Moscow also avoided addressing another crucial topic, the Russia-Ukraine ceasefire talks, which was another source of discomfort for the CCP. On the evening of May 7th, Xi Jinping arrived in Moscow. According to Xinhua News, he issued a written statement at the airport, mentioning that in the face of a complicated international situation, China and Russia would work together to oppose hegemony and power politics. This was a clear reference to the U.S., and China hoped to bring Moscow into a joint effort against it. Xi Jinping wasted no time in publicly stating his goal as soon as he landed, trying to set the tone for the upcoming talks. On the morning of May 8th, China and Russia held both small-scale and large-scale meetings at the Kremlin. According to a statement from Xinhua News, Xi Jinping said, China and Russia must stick to the direction of cooperation and eliminate external interference. He also stated that no matter how the external environment changes, China would firmly focus on its own development. This statement was more cautious than the previous day, likely due to the lack of a positive response from the Russian delegation. Thus, while Xi Jinping encouraged Russia to eliminate external interference, he was forced to scale back and focus on maintaining the direction of cooperation. After several previous talks between China and Russia, there had often been statements claiming that their cooperation was not directed at any third party, which had become a standard line. However, after this meeting, Xi Jinping no longer mentioned this phrase in the Chinese statement, while the Kremlin still referred to it. China's propaganda did not openly address the significant diversion between the two sides and tried to cover it up with a joint statement and some cooperation agreements. Yet, during the large-scale talks, Putin once again emphasized that China-Russia relations are based on equality, mutual benefit, respect for each other's interests and sovereignty, and are not directed against any third party. Putin's words are likely directed at Trump. Xi Jinping's primary goal fell short, but to maintain Moscow's support, he still had to sign the prearranged bilateral cooperation agreements. Although Moscow was reluctant to join China's anti-US campaign, it still aimed to make more money from China. In the talks, Putin focused on enhancing economic and trade cooperation between the two nations. Putin mentioned that the trade volume reached $245 billion in 2024, with 86 projects worth $200 billion. He also noted that Russia is China's largest oil supplier, the top natural gas exporter through pipelines, the second largest coal supplier, and the third largest supplier of liquefied natural gas. Russia also plans to open the Far East natural gas pipeline by 2027, with an annual capacity of 10 billion cubic meters. Putin also mentioned that Russian-designed nuclear power plants are being constructed in China according to the agreed timeline, and expressed willingness to expand Russia's agricultural product exports to the Chinese market. In the trade war with the U.S., China has significantly reduced its imports of U.S. agricultural products, and Russia is now seizing the opportunity to fill that gap. Putin also stated that Russia has become China's top global car export destination and hopes that China will establish production facilities in Russia and transfer industrial capacity there. Putin further mentioned that Chinese companies are participating in 63 investment projects in key development zones in the Vladivostok free port, and he encouraged Chinese businesses to continue investing in Russia. On the other hand, Moscow is taking advantage of U.S. mediation in the Russia-Ukraine ceasefire talks to improve its relationship with Washington, seeking to ease the sanctions imposed on it. Moscow is trying to benefit from both China and the U.S. At the same time, the U.S. has indicated that it would leave the negotiations at any time, but China doesn't have this option and is essentially being outmaneuvered by Moscow. On the afternoon of May 8th, Xinhua News reported that Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese General Secretary Xi Jinping had a team meeting at the Kremlin. Xi Jinping stated that the world has entered a new period of turbulence and transformation, and that China and Russia should maintain strategic focus and continue strategic cooperation. The report added that the two leaders exchanged views on the Ukraine crisis and discussed a potential peace agreement between Russia and the Ukraine. However, the Kremlin did not release a statement about the meeting, leaving it unclear whether the discussion addressed the Russia-Ukraine war. Neither side mentioned the war during the morning talks. Moscow likely prefers to handle the Russia-Ukraine negotiation directly with the U.S. and NATO, without Chinese involvement. China's state-run CCTV report seemed somewhat evasive. In a 2-minute video, Xi Jinping and Putin appeared on screen for only a few seconds, while the rest of the footage focused on the exterior views of Moscow. After the talks, Xinhua reported that Xi Jinping and Putin jointly met with the press. The Kremlin issued a statement highlighting the focus on bilateral cooperation, particularly noting that almost all Russia-China trade transactions are conducted in rubles and yuan. Since Russia has been excluded from the U.S. dollar transaction system, it can no longer conduct trade with China using the dollar. U.S. President Donald Trump had warned BRICS countries against excluding the dollar, and Putin's comment seemed aimed at reminding Trump that China, not Russia, is the U.S.'s true adversary. It's clear that China and Russia are using each other. There's actually little trust between the two. Russia is sending Chinese mercenaries to fight and die, while simultaneously training Chinese military personnel. However, this strategy of involving China more deeply in the conflict has begun to face backlash. On June 23rd, NATO Secretary Mark Rutte issued a stern warning ahead of the NATO summit, stating that China's ongoing large-scale military modernization significantly increases the likelihood of military action against Taiwan. He specifically emphasized that if large-scale conflict breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, Russia may escalate military chaos in Europe to divert NATO's strategic attention and military resources. This would pose an unprecedented and severe threat to Europe's security and stability. In response to Russia's long-term strategic threat and China's rapidly expanding military capabilities, along with the multidimensional support from North Korea, China, and Iran for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Rutte stressed that NATO must substantially enhance its overall defense capacity. Given the current global security situation's complexity and severity, NATO has decided to raise its members' military spending target from the current 2% of GDP to 5%. In response to these accusations, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian denied them at a regular press briefing on June 26, emphasizing that China has always been a steadfast builder and defender of world peace. He also claimed, on the Ukraine issue, China has always been committed to promoting peace and negotiations and actively pushing for a political resolution of the crisis, and has never provided weapons or equipment to any party involved in the conflict. However, according to Ukrainian media reports, since Russia launched its full-scale military action in February 2022, 2022, Western countries have continuously accused China of providing substantial strategic support to Russia in terms of trade and diplomatic relations. As China and Russia continue to deepen their military cooperation, European countries are revising their policies toward China. At the Shangri-La Dialogue Security Forum in Singapore, French President Emmanuel Macron and other European leaders recently warned that the growing strategic cooperation between China and Russia poses a significant threat to global security. They called on Eurasian countries to strengthen cooperation to address this most serious challenge. Two authoritarian countries, distrustful of each other yet using each other for their own ends, have lost an important ally and sparked a full-scale counter-response from Europe. What seemed like a formidable axis of evil may soon unravel. It remains unclear whether the mercenary Wang Meng has shown Putin and Xi Jinping the right path forward.